on November 25, the year 24. And with me is LA-based Dr. Ken Lloyd. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Well, the show today is called Hello, APAC. In other words, Asia Pacific region. It's already daybreak there. So there's some people waiting to get in, so stand by, please. They'll all be joining us momentarily now. Dr. Ken Lloyd, why don't you quickly just say hello to the audience that's out there?
Hi, audience. Nice to see all of you, and hope you'll enjoy today's discussion. My background is in organizational behavior, organizational development, having consulted for many years, taught part-time in the UCLA MBA program, and written several business books dealing with people at work. Most recently, the newest one is another dummies book on performance appraisals. It's a new edition of the first one that I wrote about 9 years ago. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me to today's discussion.
You bet, Ken. And so I want to introduce people that are on early with us. First of all, Miko in Kobe, Japan. Miko, welcome, my friend. And you are CEO of the All Japan relocation. And my screen is kicking up here. 1 minute, please. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Hi, Amiko. Welcome. And
Yeah,
from Hong Kong, Beverly Sun, old-time friend. Thank you very much for being on the program. And Michael Piker in Tokyo, good friend, been interviewed by me a few times and is very well known in global HR and top level thinking for very large organizations. Mike, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. And joining us now is Charles Leo. Charles, for the first time, I am Ed. I'm in
Hello.
San Diego, and we have with us Dr. Ken Lloyd in LA. Charles, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Charles Leo.
So I'm the commercial director at Asian Mobility Services. So it's essentially a household goods DSP and immigration company. We're basically based in Singapore as the headquarters and China as well. So those are the two locations that we're covering. We're part of a larger group, the Volman Group in the Netherlands. So we form sort of the APAC entity for Volman.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm very familiar with that organization. They have participated in some of my European meetings pre-COVID, and I hope to meet them again. So, hi, Amiko. You had a good time in Washington. I saw all your photos.
Okay, it's great.
Yeah, welcome. And I very much would welcome your colleague when she can come in. I got a memo that she will be delayed somewhat. Okay, so Beverly, how's it going? Did you enjoy Washington?
Oh, absolutely. It was just so beautiful. And of course, seeing everyone at the conference, I thought it was a very lively event and very engaging. So had a good time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So, you know, when I set up the time zone thing, I did it using one of the online world clocks, and it was before daylight time switched. And so maybe that's why I screwed it up. I'm sorry for the delay, but thank you for sticking with. So tell me, Beverly, what's going
Yeah.
on across your network? Must be really
Well,
busy.
yes, we have. In fact, we, as you know, for Asia, I think we're a little bit slower in respect of being a little bit more conservative about COVID. So finally, and there have been some other, I think, geopolitical issues that have been occurring. And my thought process was once the elections were over with in the US, then things would start rolling everywhere. And that seems to be the case for us. So we've been quite busy in the region. It's just the beginning, I think, but it's encouraging to see that companies are I think now revisiting this region. And so we've been busy. As you know, we also cover all of China. And so the activity it has started, particularly with immigration. So that gives us a very strong indication that people will be returning. They may be coming from more diverse groups globally, which I think is always interesting and more exciting to see the emergence of diverse teams. This past year, we've been very active in Taiwan, and I think it's been exciting again because I have never worked with a group that has been so diverse at the ground level in terms of its staffing. So it's been fun.
Oh, that's very interesting. So I want to reintroduce now Dr. Ken Lloyd. He has been on several of our programs and has guided me in my thinking about what it means to be a business writer and consultant after many years at the top level of a very large company. Ken, why don't you take the floor here and talk a little bit in depth about your global HR experience and the fact that you now have the second edition of Performance Appraisals and Phrases for Dummies. Well, I would fall into that category, but somebody like Michael Piker would not. He knows all this stuff. So, Ken, meet Michael.
Well, yeah, so nice to meet Michael, and frankly, all of you. It's quite a gathering. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. My work internationally has really been with various companies that have an international presence, as opposed to working literally in another country. I've worked in my entire career in the U.S. International consulting on the ground in Canada, and working with companies based obviously in other countries. And it's so interesting, when I hear Beverly talking about diversity and how important that is in so many respects, and going beyond the traditional understanding of diversity. We're even talking about neurodiversity these days, and moving beyond race, color, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and so forth, to really be committed to diversity and recognizing the kind of strength and effectiveness that brings to organizations, as well as enriching the lives of the employees on an individual and team basis. My background is in org behavior and org development. Went to Berkeley as an undergrad, UC Berkeley, and then UCLA for a master's and doctorate in the area that I just mentioned. I was in consulting for many years, had my own practice, joined a client firm, and stayed there for 18 and a half years, which I didn't see that when I joined, when the president of the company and this client company said, "You ever think about joining a client?" I thought, well, that would be interesting. And I really like them. And frankly, it was kind of fun as a consultant to be able to implement programs, policies, and practices and really stay with them, develop them over the years with a very interesting and team that's receptive to new ideas and new approaches, and certainly getting into the importance of diversity. The company manufactured medical apparel, is one of the largest medical apparel manufacturers in the world, and certainly selling the product worldwide and manufacturing most of it overseas. So there was that connection as well. All the while, I was always writing. It's been one of my passions and hobbies. I've written, as Ed kindly mentioned, a book 15 years ago on performance appraisals and phrases and for dummies. And frankly, they asked for a new edition, which I just completed, which will come out in about a month. But along the way, writing other books dealing with effective management, dealing with people, dealing with difficult people at work, recognition, selling, improving sales skills after studying salespeople for quite a while and extending findings of that into a hands-on guide to help in the persuasive process. Was kindly introduced to Ed by Paul Falcone, who's an HR expert, and have always enjoyed since then working with Ed and meeting the very interesting professionals that he brings into these programs. And I'm both delighted and honored to be part of this.
Michael, thanks for your time again. So how's it going? Settling in better?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. You probably read China and Japan have introduced a new bilateral agreement without visas. The beauty sector is still a little bit challenged. Life is good. But yeah, overall, very positive.
Oh, that's really good. So, tell me about Shiseido. Are they active relocators?
Well, I've run, I guess, mobility in 8 huge companies. This is probably one of the smaller programs I've had. As Emiko knows, outbound Japanese mobility practices hasn't changed much over many years. And we're moving from a very expensive policy to something that's more in the market. So telling assignees that they're actually having a reduction in pay is always very unpopular, but you need to do it. So that's been challenging. I guess the bigger issue is travel retail in China's economy for all sectors is very challenged at the moment. So consumer sentiment is not so strong. Macroeconomic indicators in China right now are actually quite weak. And with the tariffs that are coming from Trump, it's going to be quite a battle in the next couple of years. So that's a very quick summary.
Yeah, well, thank you. So, Emiko, uh, you have recently been recognized by the relocation industry for your wonderful expertise and hands-on care.
Thank you.
I welcome you to describe more about
Okay.
All Japan relocation for our global viewing audience.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yes, it's getting recognized, but how do you say? It's hard to say because we provide our service at the beginning. It always goes to the hospitality, but recognize is we have to, of course, let them know we are here. Then we try to keep our, how do you say, our service as much as possible, try to adjust, what they want. That's all about it. And then people likes us, then we have a repeated customer, then again, it's getting noticed. And now it's luckily after we, last month, as you know, I went to US for the WERC, and we have lots of chance to meet inspiring all the leaders and people, and we joined the event, and including, Charles, we met there at the last day, and we also at the met in event, and then we exchange all the ideas, insights, and then we can run them, how do you say, I realize it's different from the, how do you say, I should say country or region, and especially Japan, it's like, and also thank you, Ed, I had a chance to meet Michael, and in spite of he is such a busy person, and I know he has a so busy schedule, but since I had a business trip to Tokyo after WERC, so it's kind of courage, brave. I had to ask him because I know he's a so busy person. So, but since only the 2 days I have available, so I asked him, and he's nicely, I could meet him. I could visit Shiseido, and that's very inspired me. He told us at the moment right now is also nice, and it's many challenges. Japanese company. We are in Japan and providing service in Japan, but most of it's so much different. So that's why we have only less Japanese company. It's providing service. Japanese company don't provide as much as compared to a foreign company. That's also, challenge for us too.
Interesting. So I see Ellie is here. Welcome. You're on mute.
Sorry.
Yeah. Hello.
Nice to let me in. I have the customers coming soon, but maybe I can join for a few minutes and come back later. Thank you for letting me join anyway. So I'm carefully listen what you guys are talking about.
Yes, well, we're introducing ourselves and about the recent experience of Amico and Charles in Washington and Beverly as well. And so your role is as CEO of leasing, right?
Yes.
And so what does that mean? Describe, please.
Okay. My company, Tokyo Lease Corporation, is lending furniture to expats who are visiting in Japan for about 2 to 3 years. And we rent extensive amount of furniture to any project. We have 2 showrooms and we have the large warehouses around Tokyo. And we also have the cooperation with Emiko, and she can supply furniture to the west part of Japan, and we can supply to the north and east part of Japan. So we're working together to supply furniture and making a furnished apartment for the experts who are visiting in Japan. And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, thank you. Welcome. Welcome back, Beverly. And so are you familiar, Beverly, with Ellie from Tokyo Leasing?
Yes, I know Vivari. Actually met her a long time ago before COVID, and she kindly let me in together with a taxi going to, I forgot, and I think it was in Seattle. So nice to see you, Vivari.
Always serendipitous. Am I on mute?
I hear you.
Oh,
I can.
okay. Yeah, I said all these meetings are serendipitous. It's all intended. So pleasure to see everybody this morning.
Yeah, that's great. Well, welcome. I'm glad you're able
Thank you.
to do this. So the purpose of this is to have a conversation about trends in the industry and using this platform, this microphone, if you will, to not only communicate with the people on the screen, but our audience will be global and pretty extensive worldwide as a result of our established network through LinkedIn primarily, and Facebook and YouTube, and our own Global Business News established network. Across the world, we will distribute the recording of this program nonstop, free access, no toll gate, because we want eyeballs. We want to have customers. And if we put a toll gate on it, it may bring in some cash, but it keep away more than we want to talk with. And welcome back. Anyway, that's the end of the sales pitch about, as you can see behind me here, Global TV Talk Show. We have plenty of eyeballs on multiple programs. Dr. Ken Lloyd has been on several programs the past year or so. Ken, for the audience here on screen as well as out there in the world, subsequent to tonight's original production date, tell Michael and tell Charles and tell Beverly and tell Ellie and tell Miko why you think this is an effective medium to use for your purposes as a business writer, as a business consultant, and as somebody with, for many years, finger on the pulse of organizational development and organizational psychology.
Okay, well, looking specifically at what you have with the Global Talk Show News, it's interesting because today to get messages out to people, this is a wonderful forum for that. And it goes wide. And to me, these sessions are always interesting, they're informative, they're educational, and they're entertaining. And that all goes back to what you, as the individual who puts all of this together, bring to this. You have very interesting people, and you draw out, very interesting conversations. And they'll be academic, they'll be research-based, there'll be opinions, there'll be stories, all of which enhance the learning process. I mean, we know that for learning to be effective, we really like to see it's two-way, it's interactive, people are getting feedback, they're able to practice. But frankly, in today's virtual world, and particularly with hybrid workplaces, these kinds of sessions are getting better and better in helping people learn and grow and develop. And that's a major positive. But again, we've been on some that are so canned, not yours, but others, that everything seems mechanical and overdone and refried, and it's not that interesting. By design ed, you want these unscripted. You want people to talk, say what's on your mind. What have you experienced? What have you learned? What do you think of what was just said? And that makes for an interesting dialogue. And even if I'm a viewer out there and I'm not a participant, I'm interested in this conversation because it is not just some staged mechanical program, but rather interesting people talking about interesting topics in interesting ways. It's not all so rigorously put together that it's tough to understand, and yet it's not so basic that, oh, I already know all this stuff. It's in that zone where people can really learn. So I think it's a very effective medium that you, Ed, have selected. I know you were in print media before, and it's not just the medium, it's the way that you handle it, and frankly, the kinds of guests and professionals that you bring on to share their ideas and insights.
I really appreciate that. But let's go a little deeper into you. You're in Hollywood and have been impacted, of course, by that exposure over the years. And tell me about the conversations that you've had with some of the people who you've met on our show with me not present. And I don't want to know any secrets, but the kinds of topics that I've been fortunate enough to develop for broadcast and conversation in this format, which is totally unscripted. But I'll tell you, it's content collaboration is our superpower, our best practice. And we give people who are going to be on the show media prep so that they're not afraid of this little green light right here. And they just need to learn the basics of media, and we teach that gladly. So Ken, in your book coming out in a few weeks, Performance Appraisals and Phrases, if I get this wrong, please correct me, for dummies. So a dummy is someone who's like me, who's not in the business, but attached to it.
Yeah, well, first, let me talk about the people that I've met on your program, all of whom have been interesting. There have been follow-up conversations in a number of cases, but people I normally in my course of work might not have met. Joe McGuire, who's a specialist in reading people's faces, and it's not just light, it's really digging in deeply in that area. Stephen Howard, who's developed a term he calls humany, bringing the whole human side and harmony into work. And I could go down the list off the top. Such interesting people, which is nice. And again, sometimes in today's work environment, the paths might not cross, or maybe you're at some conference and you say hello, and it goes. This really helps develop those kinds of relationships. Dummies in areas across the board. I mean, there are areas where we, not in the pejorative sense, where we all could learn more. And the dummies term it's a term that's not being nasty or insulting, but saying, hey, here's an area where you can get some hands-on useful knowledge and topics that are important today. And that's really what they try to do with Wiley Publishing. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly a dummy in a number of areas, and yet some of the dummies books can really help with that, particularly the range that they cover. For Performance Appraisals, a 15-year-old book was outdated. 15 years and a lot has happened in performance reviews, performance appraisals. They're more typically now not once a year where you shock people. Yeah, 6 months ago, you did a great job on this project, or I really didn't like what you did. And all that does is create stress and difficulty and angst for managers and obviously for those receiving the feedback. So today, performance appraisals they're typically more than once a year. They're supported by continuous feedback, which is really regular, ongoing two-way communication between employees and their managers. Their two-way communication, they focus on employee training and growth and development and the future and their careers. So it's really with managers functioning more as coaches and certainly not as disciplinarians trying to catch people doing something wrong and then providing delayed feedback that has the least impact of any kind of feedback. but it's really designed to help and build the individual, build performance, help the individual move toward his or her career development. It's a very different kind of tool. And yes, if an employee is not performing up to par, they'll get that feedback through continuous feedback, and then they'll get, the term is feed forward, on steps that we can take together to help you build and strengthen your skills and your effectiveness at work. So it's a very different kind of approach. And the phrases are in there to try to not write what the managers specifically say word for word, but to give managers tools and some guidance on, here's some phrases you might want to think about, apply, adapt more personally to the situation that you're in. But at least you're not coming in cold turkey, Thanksgiving expression, coming in cold turkey on how to really write out the kind of feedback and feed forward that you'd like to give to the employee.
Michael Piker, this time of year is difficult. A lot of companies are doing year-end things, right? And it's geopolitics is playing into people policies, and of course impacting relocations also. And some people are afraid to be relocated because because of their last name or because of who they are and how they act and look. What do you think?
Yeah, well, there's two vignettes here. First, Ken's symmetry around performance. I could talk a lot about that. It's beautiful. Thank you for that overview. Let me just give you a tangible example about relocation, teething pain, and APAC. So just 2 months ago, I had to deal with, as you know, a Japanese expatriate kid was killed in southern China. And we have lots of expats in Shanghai and Beijing and Guangzhou and Wuxi. And we had to introduce a new facet of our policy to permit families to repatriate early if they feel angst or danger by living in China. And this is a real issue. We had a Gyaku no Bai, so the opposite issue in Japan, where a Chinese expat child was demarring one of the temples, one of the most famous temples in Tokyo. So there is this tension, being very blunt, between Korea, Japan, and China that's pre-existed for hundreds of years. And what happens is it then suffuses itself in how people move and how people do or do not feel comfortable moving between countries in APAC. And in my Shiseido mobility policy, I had to make an amendment to let people come back to Tokyo frequently because they don't feel comfortable living in China. So this is a really, really real issue that I have to deal with every day.
So Beverly, you
I-
are dealing with this. Would you please comment?
I first of all, I'm going to just address Dr. Lloyd. I love the approach of not being simply a structured dialogue or structured programs that you take time to expand. I think one of the challenges in our own industry is that we're so busy looking to physically relocate people that we forget the heartbeat. And I think it's extremely important to do assessments beyond the schooling, the needs, and to take a deeper cut into creating programs that help your people to succeed. So thank you for that, Dr. Lloyd. Mike, I totally appreciate.
Ken, no doctor.
Oh, thank you for the permission. I will call you Ken thereafter. Mike, I think, yes, those situations are extremely traumatic, just as 7 October was when that occurred. All expats had to be air vac'd urgently. And the concept of taking people on home leave more frequently should be looked at in total, because I think it's extremely difficult to transfer people from culture to culture, particularly when they are so group based. Our families are extremely important. And so that need for connection. If you're in the US, you're probably glad to get away from the occasional Thanksgiving and all the obligatory trimmings that come with that. I'm being a little facetious, but it's a different culture where it becomes exciting. Whereas for an Asian culture, that fallback and comfort. I mean, I'm so pleased to hear you creating that as part of your package because it's meaningful.
Yeah, our assignees requested it because they felt unease by living in China, and I had to, rightly, my CEO, Metsang, we have 7,000 people in China. We have a massive footprint and massive
That's right.
number of assignees, and they just didn't feel comfortable living there. And so I had to
That's
react fast.
that said, you know, we deal with Asians moving into Asia, and I understand the historical context of Japan, Korea, and China. I do feel, though, that for the most part, with the younger generation, their perspective of newcomers from Korea and Japan is very different. So I would not want to reinforce these tensions, but to find ways in which we can help to integrate the various cultures into China. And I think that's where our focus in relocation can be. I think that's part of a strategy. We shouldn't just be implementers. I work on with corporates in creating strategies for entry into a country. And this is such a delicate topic, but a very important, whether you're moving someone from India to Taiwan or from Hong Kong to Taiwan.
Precisely.
So that overall sensitivity. I love to hear this, that you
I mean,
focus
you've
on
got
that.
this symmetry of historic legacy, right? Regardless of where you
Yes,
live, well, because I've lived in, 9 countries. But then you've got mobility that has to cut through and actually not be, if you will, reflective of the past, but of the future. And so mobility is a fantastic weapon to actually normalize the world and bring people together, right?
absolutely.
And that's the
That's right. Yeah.
penultimate outcome of something that if it's done well and done adroitly, then we have less geopolitical tension because we understand each other better, right? And so, speaking to that, I was preaching to the converted, but we shouldn't let history be a barrier to mobility.
So I want
Well,
to
I think
say, if I may just jump in real quick, Bev, Michael, the converted, we are used to this, but the actual practice of it is dependent upon one-on-one, who's doing it, and the sensitive nature and the introspection required and the willingness to share personal information with a provider. And then the provider being sensitive enough, or the right word today is empathy, but not screwing it up. Right, Beverly?
I think this is where mobility and HR need to come to the room, and we need to be on the table with your relocation providers. And in some cases, I think relocation providers offers because they're on the ground. So what may be perceived at a high level may not necessarily be all that is required, or maybe more. So what we look to do is we look to work very closely to understand, and I think profiles of the grouping of employees that you bring in to any country need to be studied more deeply before the transition occurs. We spent a good deal of time with assignees prior to their move, with very distinct meetings, very face to face. And that's where we're also doing assessments beyond the information given us. And so it's a very tailored. So when we actually are implementing the service, it's not a cookie cutter service. but it's one which is designed to assist the family for needs that are expressed and unexpressed. And one of them is the culture, the fear. If you're going to Korea, to China, and we've been putting people in third-tier cities, and there's a tremendous amount of fear. So it's all a matter of unleashing, using the history in a positive way. And
Michael,
the commonality, I think, is important. That's
yeah.
it. I'll
Michael,
let others speak.
would you like to comment about the dual career dilemma that I know you've encountered that over the years, but have you seen any of that in Tokyo?
Yeah, I'll just give you, I'll give you a very tangible personal example. I think you're aware of my friend. So everybody knows I'm gay and I've got a husband who's in fashion. We're legally married, but as a dual career couple, my husband can't get a resident permit because Japan doesn't recognize same-sex marriage. So just as a very simple, frank thing is I've had as a conundrum, I have a great job, a great gig, but my husband can't work, nor become a resident in Japan. So we finally got the exception. I think one of my staff just told me right now, which is great. But then the next step is, can he or she, or be it opposite or same-sex couples, be employed cohabiting with, let's say, somebody who's been posted themselves. Now, you know, all of us can do this in other countries, but when you get to, because I lived in China and Singapore and Japan for years, Japan's the more trickier one because of this issue about immigration employability. But a lot of companies, including mine, Shiseido, we do provide dual employment support, CV assistance, networking, interview prep, media training, network aggregation. So lots of great companies do that, both in and outbound. But it comes down to where penultimately can you legally work as a couple? And that varies dramatically across APAC. So some jurisdictions allow it, some don't. So you've got this duopoly of immigration meets GM policy, and they don't always synchronize so well. If that makes sense.
Michael, thank you for sharing this very sensitive topic. I'm aware.
Yes.
Let's bring in Amiko and Charles. So Amiko, you're hearing all this stuff, and I'm sure in your company it's large and effective in so many areas, helping so many people. And I know your specialty, your superpower, Amiko, is your personal care for people. So I'd like you to feel comfortable explaining that a little bit to the audience.
Well, that's the only things I wanted to point out is like I told you, the hospitality, but back in the hearing, not our service. I'm just thinking of, you know, talking with Beverly and Michael, how difficult, how do you say, for us to, you know, Japanese company, I wanted to do, we are the, you know, DSP, you know, destination service provider in Japan. So we are providing service for the foreigner who are coming to Japan inbound. So we are trying to understand, you know, all over the world, you know, who come from United States, England, and of course Taiwan, and then we try to understand, and we really try to work with them. But now we're challenging it. Well, not challenge, maybe it takes a few years. That's a Japanese, I wanted to do the outbound, but even the Japanese, for me, Japanese company is already, I can see the hard work, like a budget, and also the so many processing. And, but of course, Japanese people, like Michael said, who go to experts going to abroad, they wanted to very comfortable with being with the Japanese people. And of course, then they wanted to, it's so nice, you know, coming back to Tokyo often. It's also feel safe in the surrounded with Japanese. So how do you say? But it's so how do you say, how do you say, I don't know. Mike, can you help me?
あ、いいよ。なんか、日本語で英語でできるよ。
Not English things. It's hard to explain even Japanese. It's hard to provide in service for the Japanese people, the Japanese.
Because the outbound Japanese have extremely unique requirements
Yeah, that's
that
I
are
wanted.
probably different from any other outbound nationality I've dealt with.
Meaning there's great care, total care, not and no risk.
Give you 5 specific examples. Emiko and all my colleagues, I'm sure, know this. So the Japanese market basket for the cost of living allowance is very specifically tailored to Japanese shopping at Japanese department stores in host cities. It's very specifically only going to Japanese expatriate schools in the host location. The way in which Nippon Express ships your stuff, the way the white glove service works, it's very high touch VIP service because it's very specific to Japanese culture. I can give you a list of, but Emiko, something like this, right? Is what you were trying to mention, right?
Yes. It's
Japanese expats have very high demand and very, very high touch. But Tokyo Lease, I know you know this too. So outbound Japanese I've been doing this for 35 years. The Japanese expats are probably another level of complexity. I can't explain it. It's just so unique.
even the like.
Well, orderliness, right? The discipline, the orderliness is really
So.
Like even the Saturday and Sunday, if the the shipment arrive in 8 o'clock, have to be arrived in 8 o'clock.
Exactly at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly. They think that's they plan. So if something different, then they feel so up here and not right, and they feel uncomfortable. And then so that's why all the moving company and real estate, everybody is so well, we think that's normal, but it's too much care. So if it's less, then it's disaster.
I get it. Yeah, I understand. Charles Leo, do you want to add to this wonderful conversation?
No, it's very interesting. I've been listening in, observing a lot of very insightful information that everyone's sharing. But I do acknowledge that the Japanese market is very unique, and in the 25 years I've been in business, and a lot of my work is into business development, it's always difficult to try and get the attention of Japanese clients because of that uniqueness of the requirements. And I think, Mike, you're right. I do have industry friends and ex-colleagues that are currently at Nippon Express, and I see the amount of detail they go into, right? Right down to having an on-site manager so that someone can speak the language and give that sense of security, comfort, familiarity to the assignee. So that's very unique. I think it's difficult to scale up, I think, from a business standpoint, which is why I do actually appreciate and also admire a lot of how Japanese firms have been making their businesses work, not only just from a Japanese only perspective, but also in the foreign market as well. But I also wanted to comment on the way in general, when we talk about structure, sometimes we get into conversations about maybe we shouldn't be so structured. Maybe we should start to think a little bit about customization, because the diversification or the diversity of the demographics, not I'm not just talking about, gender and race. We're talking about age groups as well. A very, very fascinating fact that the Singapore government released recently was that in a couple of years' time, the largest workforce age group in Singapore is between 60 and 65. That is really very worrying, right? So naturally, that would mean the need for talent mobilization, really. And when you look at how the Gen Zs are moving, the Gen X are moving. It's very different. So when we have structured programs, we can't cater to everyone. Yet every time we get to the stage where we start to, sort of the money end of the conversation, invariably it moves back into structure because of pricing. So this is interesting for me because I hear how everyone's saying we need a little bit of diversity, even in the programs, even in the price structure. But this is, in my opinion, not happening quickly enough. And we try as service providers to listen to our clients, and we are listening. But each time we try and formulate something that is maybe a little bit more customized, we do end up going down the traditional route anyway. So that's sort of my sort of response and thought process as I was listening to everyone.
So the traditional route works for you guys. You all know it, and it's what gets things done. And then on top of that, you have the specific personal approach, correct?
Yeah, that's true. We try at least, we try anyway. But in terms of being able to cater, there's also the problem of scaling, right? And scaling also has some association and relevance to sustainability, right? We think about sustainability being green, but we also need to think about sustainability from a business standpoint, because clients need service providers. If service providers cannot sustain their businesses because of the inability to scale, right? Then
Scale
ultimately,
means doing multiple things that are new.
or rather, if you can do this for one, for 10, can you do it for 100 the same way, right? Without raising costs immensely, exponentially, and then essentially making your program not competitive,
Well,
if you know what I mean. Yeah.
that is really a good thing that you just explained. I really appreciate that, because the audience that we have across America, North and South America, as well as Western Europe, they are going to understand that, and they're going to applaud that approach and the willingness to learn how to do new things. Ken Lloyd, you're hearing some of this for the first kind of stuff, this deep dive into the mobility management business, but you see how it's all mental oriented, its impact on people.
Oh, absolutely. It's so easy for outsiders to look at relocations and mobility really from the standpoint of logistics. Okay, now let's get our checklist and let's do this or that in terms of housing and in terms of healthcare, instead of, and what I'm hearing much more is this very much people-oriented approach. Let's look carefully at the individuals. Let's look at the culture. Let's look at the match. Let's do some real planning with the individuals before this. And that is going to facilitate any kind of mobility that is ultimately put in place, as opposed to just looking at, here's the timing, here are the priorities, let's do this, that, and the other. To me, the other side also, and I'm hearing it referenced by both Charles and by Mike, is the question of various generations in the workforce. You mentioned, largest group to be 60 to 65 in a matter of years, but we have very different generations there, and I'm sure my guess would be that they look at mobility quite differently in terms of that prospect. So that would just be as part of this focusing on the individual, and if you will, as Ed mentioned, the psychology and sociology really associated with these kinds of moves. Are there, just as I could pose it as a question, differences that you're seeing, for example, between sort of Gen Z and perhaps those that are in the 60 to 65 range, or to be in that range quite soon? Do they approach mobility differently? Do you have to approach it quite differently depending upon generational factors?
Yeah, definitely can. The reality is the Gen Zs don't want human contact, right? And you do sometimes need to figure something out so that you strike that equilibrium between the service orientation as well as leaving them alone enough so that they won't feel frustrated. On the other hand, if you start to look at the Gen X's and maybe some of the remaining boomers that are still in the workforce, then really these guys are all about communication, face to face, you know, and I think we're more used to that than the Gen Zs and even some of the millennials, if you like, and how little contact they want and everything in a digital format. So it is, and it's getting hard as well to find, for instance, field consultants that would run with the program on the ground, you know, on face to face, that are in that same age group that would appeal to the Gen Zs. A lot of our field consultants, for example, are, you know, 40, 50-year-old expatriate wives, for instance, that is looking for some part-time work and having some familiarity with local nuances already, to then provide a dual perspective of themselves being already an expat, but having lived in Singapore, for example, for many years, and then bringing that familiarity to the assignees. So then where do we find Gen Z field consultants, for example, you know, and then if you have to go down further, the profiling, then do you need to get a German Gen Z to deal with another German Gen Z that is relocating? So there are a lot of these factors that sometimes are really difficult to mitigate.
Well, Michael,
Yeah.
how many hours? So how many hours a day do you work?
Well, Emiko and Ari, Japan is typically 12-hour days. But Charles's point is so eloquent and so well crafted. I mean, so you've got talent mobility versus duration-based mobility. We've talked about this for eons, but the millennials like DIY assignments, right? So they like to put on a backpack. They like to go to Singapore. They don't want a high-touch model. You just give them a wad of cash and you're off on the plane, right? But that is one of the talent mobility types that should be focused on, and the touch service for the DSP and the RMC is different. But even the talent compendium to address that group is very different than the boomer high touch, typically exec with high VIP add-on mobility benefits. But it's okay to have 4 different talent constructs that operate interdependently, but they're very different. And the way you touch those assignees is very different. So it's talent-led, not duration-led. And not a lot of Japanese companies do that yet. I'm trying to do that at Shiseido, which is, you know, one of the oldest companies in this country. But it's a tough slog because it's a very different mindset shift. And I've done this at other gigs, but to Charles's point, DIY is the way to go. Millennials, that's the way they want to move. Low touch, give me some cash, and I will do it myself. And they're okay with that. They're cool with that.
So how much, this is an off-the-cuff, unrehearsed program. So what percentage of those that you just mentioned, the DIY, fail, Michael?
Actually, surprisingly, they don't, because here's the crux of the issue, right? We spend an inordinate amount of time on the most expensive boomers, the upper right talent type, assess them, look for, but if the DIYs really want to go, it's self-led, not company-led. And the success rate of that proportionally is higher than company managed assignments that are traditional. So you've got this diametric opposite of all the time and effort to move and choose selectively and appropriately versus those that just go when they want to go. And the latter actually are more successful, ironically.
So
maybe-
in these Asia Pacific moves, people don't drag their furniture around, do they?
Very
Yeah,
Less and less, less
less
and
so.
less.
Yeah, less so. Yeah.
Yeah, and
You know,
so
Less and less.
everyone wants to
it
be
doesn't
asset
make
light.
sense.
Yeah.
Well, you don't even have the room to transfer your furniture because the sizes of apartments varied, and
Yeah, that's true.
obviously they're
That's true.
reduced more than not.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Square footage.
I think it's
Yeah.
similar.
Well,
It's similar in Hong Kong. It's similar in Japan. It's similar in Singapore. You know, it's shoebox type apartments on the rise, really. Yeah.
So I've
Mhm.
been doing research for this program's development, and it will be a long-term process for sure. But I've noticed that there is a huge amount of company presence in Singapore, and that is got to be magnetic more than ever now. Beverly, would you agree to that?
So I would agree to it. I think there were some issues during COVID, which led to Singapore being, in addition to its own growth and being a stable community. But COVID did drive many of the companies to go to Singapore, where other countries within the APAC Asia were more draconian in their approach to COVID.
Mm.
We've seen that ourselves. And I think what's happened, though, I do feel, with all due respect, that Singapore wasn't prepared for that influx of people moving there. So, but they've now adjusted. But what needs to be done, and this is where I believe the government will be a little bit more proactive, is to be more prepared for the future, because Singapore will continue to be an important base for many companies for a variety of reasons. It does, if China is your market, it is much more challenging to work from Singapore than it would be with some of the other countries that are closer. So those markets will eventually develop as well. Um, and so that's my take on Singapore, but it's been an important location during this medical crisis.
So
And
interesting.
Charles, you
Yeah.
can maybe address that better because you're right there in the
Yeah,
spot.
I think the thing that's working well for Southeast Asia, in particular, you know, you've got that economic cooperative region known as ASEAN. They've created the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. That's really to have an agreement between ASEAN and 6 key countries within the region: China, Japan,
Mhm.
Korea, Australia, New Zealand. And so what ASEAN is doing it really is to look at, for instance, a country like Singapore, where you've got quite a fair bit of knowledge base, but a dwindling pool of talent. And you've got the rest of Southeast Asia on the rise, obviously with better birth rates and a growing population, but the lack of knowledge, right? And what this cooperative strategy is trying to do is to try and build that cooperation between, I have the knowledge and I'll try and transfer that knowledge onto a location where it's still growing. Meanwhile, we could have that knowledge transfer being done with some of these fledglings, if you like, if I can call them that, get relocated to maybe some of the more developed economies. And that is really why, and Singapore takes the lead on that. And that's really why a lot of corporations are constantly starting up in Singapore, whether be it Asia Pacific headquarters, and some even global headquarters placed in Singapore. So I think, and I think this is necessary. I mean, when you look at down the chain, we're sort of past talking about shared resources, but it still exists. And I think between governments and between governance, there's a lot of shared resources that different countries are talking about, and Asia is unique in the sense that it's not the United States with that many states, nor is it Europe, if you like, with a single economic region. We're still trying to do our own things, while at the same time looking at how we collaborate so that this economic region can thrive. And there's still a lot of growth potential, not just in Singapore, especially for the rest of Asia, simply because Singapore is a lot more developed by now. But we need to continue to stay ahead by having these initiatives, really.
Charles, this is wonderful to have you on the show. We have around 5 or 6 minutes remaining. I want to make sure we are covering what we should. Emiko, if I could please ask you for comment, as you've heard me on the programs before, and now you're hearing me again. But I just want to ask you for your take and your approach of this information. Is she still with us?
Emiko, you're muted.
Oh.
You need
Okay, sorry, I was in mute. And also sorry, I took a long meeting with construction is going on the noise. So, okay, what information?
Yeah, all this information that you've just heard. Would you like to comment, and as we come to a close here?
Oh, okay. Well, definitely for Asia, APAC, Singapore is the leading and keep developing, and it's all RMC and many companies there, and of course, including Japanese companies. So it's kind of, but it's not, but it's getting very expensive. Singapore.
Yes.
Of course, right. You know,
Indeed.
everything.
Yeah, interesting. Well, thank you, Michael, for your insight and your sharing of such personal information. Ken Lloyd, would you like to help me summarize here?
Well, as I look at the way that you've represented this industry and what you do so well, I think of all the traits, managers have in terms of communication, hard skills, soft skills and all, but one thing you clearly need to be as successful as all of you have been is agility. The ability to handle change. You're in such a dynamic field, all these variables constantly hitting you. I take my hat off to you and just say, I'm so impressed and in awe of what you're doing and how you stay on top of all of these variables, because this is not, you go into work knowing what to expect. It's working with a constantly moving jigsaw puzzle. So I think the agility on top of the professionalism, skills, and managerial and leadership and planning and organizing, your ability to handle the dynamics of this industry is just quite inspiring. And I thank you for sharing that with us and certainly with Ed's larger audience out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Ed, I'd like to thank you. I love the diversity of this platform. First of all, I have great respect for anything to do with psychology. I think this is the root of understanding the needs of our families. So I appreciate your presence here. And Mike, just as Ed said, so being so honest and frank about your personal challenges, but also I think your overview is extremely valuable for us as a provider. And of course, my colleagues in the area. I always love meeting with you.
On December 12th
Thank you.
in New York, thank you. I'm honored to be able to produce an in-person global HR conference that's being hosted by the U.S. headquarters of HSBC. And this is the first time they're doing it with me in New York. HSBC in London has hosted me 3 times, and we'll do number 4 this April. What I've learned from that experience at that level with that big stage, if you will, is to step up, upskill, reskill what I'm doing. And now everybody's doing that. And so the whole level of the industry across borders, across time zones, across industries, across silos, has evolved fairly quickly and in a smart way. In our New York event, our key topic of the day is psychological safety in the workplace. And what's the workplace? Office, remote, at home, and on assignment. Okay. What's the psychological safety? And Beverly, you and Michael, and Charles, you just touched on all of those. And so without me even prompting it, you just got into that. And that's cool, very cool. So the psychological safety in the workplaces is going to be expanded to become a psychological contract between employee and employer. And with the employee in parens, the family that goes on the assignment. Because if the dual career dilemma blows up, the company's going to lose millions and goodwill, and the employee might have a crashed life. And that means potentially lawsuits. And what a mess. And so this has become the biggest topic. And
Oh, sure.
1212 in New York, it's going to be recorded and zoomed. Of course, it will be midnight and beyond in Asia Pacific, but it will be recorded. And then we'll take that topic and move it around the world as well.
Excellent.
Now, I'm not the
Excellent.
expert. I'm just a moderator and the builder.
No.
But we have a New York-based psychiatrist and a psychotherapist who's going to help me live. And then from London, virtual, will be business psychologist, Heather. And she's the one who wrote that wonderful report on the dual career dilemma with the Permits Foundation that has won all these awards. Yeah. And so I'm really honored to have them. And then in the afternoon, we'll be talking about the new way of handling relocations. And Professor Benjamin Bader from England is going to help me lead that discussion. And Ken Lloyd is going to be involved in that as well. So thank you again, Asia Pacific, and for doing this. And please come to the next edition. I don't know when it'll be, probably after January 1. And
Thank you.
and you'll all get
Thank
a
you.
copy of this program tomorrow, my tomorrow. And
Okay.
if there's any questions or issues, tell me. All ears.
And may I
Thank you.
just take the opportunity to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. It's my
Oh,
favorite
Yeah,
yes,
holiday.
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Right. Happy
Okay.
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, yeah. So as a matter of fact, we're here
Important holiday.
in San Diego. We're meeting in an Italian restaurant, and
Nice.
so that's a
Turkey
diversity.
sausage.
Yeah, on
I like
pasta,
that.
Thanks, Ben.
on pasta with
Yeah,
Chianti. Cheers.
sounds good to me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys. Thank
Thank you.
Hello,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Sayonara,
Thank you.
domo.
Yeah.
Bye.